In this episode, we speak with Priscilla Tran, Development Manager at City West Housing. Our discussion happened before the advent of COVID-19, and so this topic isn't referred to. However, the things we talk about are as relevant today as they were then, and maybe even more so. Priscilla generously shares her recent struggle with mental health, and in particular depression. If you're experiencing something similar, you may find this topic triggering. Otherwise, please continue listening as we bring you Priscilla's brave and inspiring story.
You're listening to Developmental, Property and the Mind podcast, where development industry insight meet mindset with Trafalgar CEO Joe Abboud. Join one of the property industry's most free thinkers as he explores the path to success and contentment.
Hi, my name is Joe Abboud and welcome to today's episode of Developmental. Last year, UDIA New South Wales launched an innovative mentoring program identifying the next generation of leaders. Priscilla Tran was selected as one of the first aspiring leaders in the Legends and Legacy program. Initially not feeling worthy, she has more than proved why she is exactly what Legend and Legacy is all about. Born and raised in Brisbane into a property family, studied architecture, thought she could have more impact from the other side of the table as a developer. In 2018, moved to Sydney and is now a development manager for City West Housing. I'm sure we all know what it feels like to try and build a network and not know where to start. I've been blessed with some phenomenal people in my life, I know that. It can have a huge impact both professionally and personally. Priscilla is a living, breathing example of this, and I'm delighted to be chatting with her today. Welcome, Priscilla.
Nice to be here, Joe.
Priscilla, why did you feel you would enjoy development more than architecture?
That's a loaded question depending on how I answer it. So basically with architecture, I have a really great appreciation of it. When I studied it, I really loved the history of it, theory of it, and some aspects of the practice of it. Not all, but some. But what I realized about development is that, well, basically I could have a great influence on the outcome. With architecture, there's a great scope for understanding the design aspect of it, and it's quite a complex discipline. But with development, you can influence greater things, including obviously the financial outcomes, but also the community engagement, ensuring that you've got the right people in the team, and the architect has very little scope to do that. So I thought I'd basically be able to influence the outcome better and with greater influence as well, being on this side of the table, really.
Okay, interesting. What actually motivated you to actually get into the industry?
Well, I think a part of me would want to say that I am quite good with the artistic side of things, and so I wanted to find a way to be creative, but in a way that will have a more lasting impact in society. And that's one of the reasons why I went to architecture in the first place. When I was in school, I found I was really good at art, but also good at sciences, and it seemed like a really great way to marry those two fields together in architecture. But in terms of developing my career, I think looking back, I'd probably have to say actually came from my family background. I grew up with parents who are in the industry, they still are, and I unknowingly probably developed a love for property and development from them. And while I love my parents and there's many things I admire about them, there's a desire still to tread my own path. So it took me a while to realize that and appreciate that and see it for what it was. But I probably think that it began just growing up in the office, which was a construction and development business, and running around the office, seeing what they were doing and loving the models I saw and all the drawings and going from there.
Did you find it hard to get your foot in the door?
Yes and no. So when I was going through architecture, I managed to find a role through connections. And I think partly because of my family background, I had a better understanding of the industry and what it would take to get into it. And also I did honestly leverage on some of the networks that they had. But at the same time, I recognized that I had to tread my own path, and I really wanted to find work outside of them and also outside of their influence, just to see if I was up for it, as opposed to what they could help me achieve. And so I found it really important for myself to find work without leaning on them, and that's how I got my role as an assistant valuer and became a valuer at Heron Todd White. That's how I got my role as an assistant development manager at Jade Corp. And while I strongly believe that parents' influence has helped me be where I am today. I like to think that a part of that has also been myself and myself alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important about that is that you might be able to get a foot in the door and through the family connections or whatever the case may be. But I think then what's important is, your ability to be able to keep the job. I mean, everybody will open the door for you, but where you come into your own is that, you actually work hard enough and people are impressed by you and they'll keep you there. Whatever connection you've got, at the end of the day, if you're not good enough to stay in that job, I don't think they're going to just keep you for the sake of keeping you. So over the last 10 roles, and it's really clear that, you've had some interesting roles over those 10 years. What have you enjoyed most?
I have to say that I really do enjoy my current role. So being a development manager at City West Housing, for you and anyone that doesn't really know too much about City West Housing, we're a non-profit community housing provider that's developed, owned and managed our affordable rental apartments in the inner city of Sydney for the last 25 years. So I've really found this particular role really tricky in that it is not just a development role, but also has to engage with policy when it comes to affordable housing and the intricacies and complexities of that. But as well as all of that, I've personally found it really rewarding to be able to apply my experience in order to help provide more diverse and resilient communities with much needed affordable housing, particularly given the housing affordable crisis that we have right now in Australia.
And how do you guys solution the affordable housing through that firm?
We're a bit different, or quite different actually, from a lot of other community housing providers, in that we were actually set up 25 years ago by various levels of government in order to create diverse communities in the Ultimo Pyrmont region, and we've since expanded our operations through the inner city of Sydney. And so when they set it up, they basically set up the affordable housing contributions within this LGA in order for us to receive them and then use those funds to develop affordable housing and maintain that into perpetuity. The way our model works is that we aren't a discount to market rent. A lot of providers base their affordable rents on that. We actually have our rents based on income. And so given it's an inner city of Sydney, even if you were to do, say, a 25% discount on market rent, you'd still be paying more than 30, perhaps even like 60 or more % of your income just towards rent, which is generally considered quite unaffordable. And so we actually cap rent to 25 to 30% of your income based on which income band you find yourself in.
And how do you get the subsidies for that?
So the subsidies come to us mainly through those affordable housing contributions, and that we get that funding through those contributions. We do rely on other types of subsidies that the government provides, whether it's us not having to pay certain infrastructure contributions, or us not having to, or us being able to access funding such as the NIFIC funding and NHFIC funding. Or being able to access NRAS funding as well. There's different schemes happening over the last 25 years.
Yeah, they change them every time there's a new government.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
It's hard to keep track sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
So there's different subsidies. Frankly, we need more. The sector, so us and the other community housing providers, we'd love to provide more and more affordable housing, but at the end of the day, subsidised housing requires subsidies, and frankly, we probably need more of that.
So, sorry, I'm probably off the beaten track a little bit, but it's really interesting to me because we have a fair bit of that interest in the business model that we run. But one of the questions I've got is, with the actual affordable housing models and the actual, I guess, types of units and sizes of units and those kind of, are they compromised in any way?
Yes and no. So, for example, with accommodation, I'd say most market apartments would have 2 bathrooms, for example, for a 2-bedroom apartment, whereas we only provide 1 bathroom for each of our apartments, whether they're 1-bedders or 3-bedders. And our residents don't seem to mind that. When it comes to size of the apartment, obviously we're limited by the same ADG requirements. Actually, so I should have asked before, I don't know how far your audience reaches. For anyone that's not in Sydney, that's the apartment design guide. We've got to meet the same requirements as any other developer in the area when it comes to the design aspect of it. But in terms of other things like finishes, we're less concerned with things that are trendy and more concerned with materials that are robust, will require less maintenance and repair and replacement, design that will be more classic and require less refurbish because it looks outdated in 5 years' time because you're following the latest trends. So we're basically more concerned about things that last, things that will stand the test of time, that will require less costs in not only yes, in terms of upfront, but more so in terms of the entire life of the building. Essentially, we're built to rent, but subsidised.
So you try to build a sustainable product that can, I guess, stand the test of time.
Yes.
And not age or deteriorate,
Yes.
and becomes a lot more cost effective in the long run.
Exactly, because we own, develop and manage our housing, and so we care about where the building will be at and how much it will cost in 5, 10, 20, 50 years' time.
Okay, interesting. Look forward to maybe going out there one day and seeing some of the products that you guys deliver. We might be able to learn something from that stuff. So, we're involved in a number of projects, and we've got some affordable housing apartments within those projects. One thing that I've been an advocate of for a long time is that, affordability is about subsidy, as you rightly said, and not about the construction costs or anything like that. So if the governments don't step up and, start to subsidise in a bigger way, then affordable housing will remain unaffordable. And in the States, it's very clear that subsidy is the key to delivering affordability,
Yes.
housing affordability.
Yeah, and the tax concessions they get and everything, it's set up completely
We can learn a lot from the US model. The US model is second to none at the moment, and affordability or affordable housing as a concept is being delivered very, very successfully all over America, only because of the subsidies and the tax relief and all of those things. In Australia, what we're finding is that the more affordable housing you provide, the higher your taxes. There's no relief. It's an uphill battle all the time. And, as we were talking with Peter earlier, supply will be the very thing that makes affordability a reality. But as long as there is a lack of supply as well, you're going to have inflationary pressures on a number of levels through there. So, look, I'm totally on the same page with you. Let's jump a little. Let's go into the topic of mentoring. You've said that you didn't feel you'd been in the industry long enough to deserve to be a part of Legends and Legacy program or apply for the Young Leaders Award. Why is that, and what changed your mind?
With the Legends and Legacy program, they were targeting people who had been in the industry for, I think, up to 8 years. And I did fit that criteria. So in terms of length of time, I felt I met that eligibility criteria. I was more concerned about the length of time in the industry for the Young Leaders Award. They were looking for the best of the best for people who are under 35. I fit that criteria. I just turned 30 last year. But I was hesitant to apply for it because I thought I hadn't achieved as much as others probably would have by the age of 35. Just seeing some of the other finalists for the award, people who are directors of their companies, have, I feel, achieved a lot, and they have. I'm absolutely honoured to be ranked amongst the other finalists. So I didn't expect to be a finalist, let alone win the award. But I was encouraged to apply and figure, why not? It didn't cost me anything except my time.
Who encouraged you to apply?
It was a combination of people. The first person that encouraged me to apply was Vanessa Pearson, who's heavily involved with the UDIA in New South Wales. It was her brainchild, actually, to have the Legends and Legacy program. So I credit a lot of this last year to Vanessa, actually. She encouraged all of the people involved with the Legends and Legacy program, the aspiring leaders and me, to apply for the Young Leaders Award. And at her encouragement, I kind of gave it a second thought. But then I spoke to my manager about it, and she, was very happy to nominate me for the award as well, which I'm also very grateful for.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that when you were talking about that, you seem to sort of stipulate certain criteria that you've got in your mind about what has been successful and what they've achieved and what not.
I think we all have ideas in our mind of what the successful person looks like. And for whatever reason, and I'm still trying to figure out for myself in terms of, psychoanalyzing myself, but I realize now that I just didn't see myself as that person. And therefore it would have been, a waste of time. Why bother applying for something if I don't even have a chance? And it took me a while to realize that assumption or preconception was perhaps false. And it kind of made me reconsider the views I had and the mindset I had for understanding what leaders look like, who leaders are, and where I fit in all of that.
Yeah, look, it's really relative at the end of the day, isn't it? So, the measure of success, it doesn't have a particular formula. As I see success, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not a monetary value or any of that kind of stuff. It could be on a number of levels. So, depending on what you're trying to achieve in your life and how you view or the lens that you see success as. So, the lens that you use to measure success is really the determining factor as to whether within yourself you feel successful or not. And I think that's key. Yeah. Most people get caught up in, what other people perceive success to be. But there's a saying I like to use often is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And you would only see that beauty or that success through your lens. And at that point, that's all that matters.
Yes.
And where we seem to fail as humans at times is that we see it, we try and perceive the success the way other people would perceive success as opposed to how we see it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think when you're younger and more perhaps immature or uncertain of your own identity, you base what success looks like on what other people tell you because you don't really have anything else to compare it to. But then as I've gotten older, I've realised that my definition of success is quite different from what other people's definition is. And to figure out what my definition is, or why that is, to actually challenge that as well for myself. And once I'm more settled with that, figure out for myself, how do I actually achieve that? And what does that look like?
Awesome. What are some of the standout moments for you?
For my career or for my life?
Either or. Take it where you want to go. Oh, actually, in no particular order.
Yeah.
But whatever you want to talk about first. I'm good with both.
Yeah. I think I have to say, particularly because it's very recent, this last year has been a standout for me.
Yeah.
I'm still processing it. The year that I had in 2019, partly for many reasons. I moved from Brisbane to Sydney recently. I've been here since August 2018. So just a year and a half really in Sydney. And after moving to Sydney for various reasons, I became depressed, and I'd never had depression before in my life, and it hit me really hard. I was very shocked by it. I've personally considered myself a very optimistic person, and in some ways, even though I know that mental health can affect anyone and everyone, and does to a certain extent, whether it was pride or ignorance, I just didn't think it would happen to me, particularly given how good my life is generally. I didn't think I, in some ways, deserved depression, in that other people have, much worse lives. Like, what do I have to complain about? And so it took me a while to accept that.
How did you process that?
I'm grateful in that I've actually have a lot of friends who have struggled with depression in the past and still do. And so I could see what they'd gone through. And my husband also had his own depressive period a year before I got mine. And so I knew what the signs were. And so when I started not being able to breathe at various points and catching my breath, when I realised that I was tense all the time, that I couldn't sleep, where I'd start crying uncontrollably, I realised, this is not me. Not only this is not me, this is not normal behaviour. I sure was going through a stressful period, but I've been through stress before, and I'd handled it and was, I thought, more resilient than that. And so something was wrong. For initially, I thought maybe I was just sick and stressed and it would be a phase, but it got to a point, particularly when I started crying in public, and I was like, no, this is something, I need to fix this. And being the problem solver that I am, I identified that it was probably depression, but obviously need to get it diagnosed and to seek help for it. So after, I think I started I don't know how to quantify it, but it took me about a month of that kind of behaviour, which was spiralling worse, before I got to a point where I was, I basically hadn't slept all night and I was really sick of myself. And I was like, when I wake up, if I can wake up in the morning, I'm going to go see the doctor. And so I messaged my boss to say that I was going to be in late. I had to, see the doctor. I went to the doctor, and the GP told me, actually, he made me go and answer all these questions. And from there, I could determine I was, I had hit the trifecta in terms of sadness, anxiety, and also stress, anxiety, and depression, and recommended I see a psychologist. And I filled out a mental health plan. And so I made an appointment to see the psychologist as soon as I could. And after that, went to work And having taken that step, like, it was such a relief. I felt like I was finally gaining some control back over myself.
By taking that first step to go see the
So
doctor.
and recognizing that was like my way of starting to take back more control over my life, and in some ways my emotions, which were
Identifying it and admitting it is the first step to resolving it.
Exactly.
And props to you for doing that. And then, did you find out what triggered that?
Based on how I recovered, a lot of it was internal, in the way I processed my emotions, or rather didn't process my emotions. And I'm a highly rational person, very analytical, and I rationalize my emotions out of myself. And I realized the hard way that you can't do that, that it's
So
actually
you're being
not
a little
fair
too
to
hard on
yourself.
yourself?
Definitely. I'm my own worst enemy
critic, yeah.
and worst critic. And in some ways, I recognize that. I mean, the good thing is that, okay, I know that no one can say anything as bad as I can say to myself. But the bad thing is I am talking to myself constantly in my head every minute and every second of every day. And when I was super stressed, I was giving myself tough love to the extent that I fell apart.
Wow, okay.
I wasn't letting myself or my emotions to be, and then to deal with them and then move on. I just repressed them.
So the constant chatter to yourself in your mind and all that noise in your mind ends up getting the best of you, and then comes out in the form of, whether it's depression, but a combination of the crying and all of that stuff that comes out there is the way that you were trying to deal with the internal fight and struggle that you're having with yourself.
Exactly.
So really it was an issue between you and you,
Yes.
right in that time.
Yeah.
And the only one that can fix that is
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing how the mind works, and how mental health, we're involved in a number of things at the moment on a mental health level. We're setting out to build a transitional housing for the homeless in conjunction with Wesley Mission at the moment. And once we sort of explored the whole notion of homelessness, once we sort of looked into it, we started to realise that it was a mental health issue and not necessarily anything to do with money. So, we relate to this mental health issue, and I just appreciate that you're so willing to discuss and talk about that. And I think the vulnerability in that is the key to moving forward in resolving it. And when you're that vulnerable about that topic, that is key to that resolution within you and for everybody else that's out there, that vulnerability is key, right?
I think one of the things I held firm to was, like I said, in depression, your mind kind of twists reality, and as a touchstone in a way of reality. My faith as a Christian in Jesus kind of kept me through that as well, because I realized that there are some things that must be true and must be real, even if I don't feel like that's the case right now. And so constantly believing, I basically had to put faith in something I didn't feel to be true for myself, but I knew to be a fact, that I was loved by God and that I was worthy because of that love.
One of the strategies I've used in my life in trying to deal with bad thought patterns is sometimes not to fight the thought pattern. Sometimes just go with it and allow yourself that it's okay not to be okay for a moment, and not fight that. Because half the problem is, at times, and I'm not talking that I know I've experienced it to the level that you have, but one of the things that I've been able to do is allow myself to go through it and find a knowing within myself that I know I'm going to come out of that, okay in the end. And it might be in an hour, it might be in a day, or it might be in a week. But that's okay, because I've just need to go through this. And then I look back at it and I say, what's it trying to tell me? What's it trying to teach me?
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a perspective that you can have as someone who isn't depressed, though. I remember when I was depressed, I felt like that was my reality now, and my life would never be okay again. And so I think, and to go really deep, we probably should put a content warning on this particular episode, but, like when I was contemplating suicide, it wasn't for me a way for me to die. Like most people, I think, who think about suicide don't want to die. They don't love death. It's a way to end the pain. And I think I had to find ways to basically remember what life was about, and in doing so, find the purpose that was that has helped me like carry on through this whole time. And I don't know, like I think there's a lot of people out there that probably think about it as a way of ending the hurt that they're currently experiencing. And they try and dull that feeling or move past that feeling too quickly, whether it's, through substance abuse or other, forms of really a way of distracting themselves.
It's an
or
escape.
self-hurt.
It's an escape.
But I think when you kind of look at yourself in the mirror and deal with the shadows within you, then it lets you kind of not just in some ways make peace with them. Yeah, I mean, moving forward a bit, I had depression at the end of 2018 to early 2019 and still struggling with that and wrestling with that. I applied for the Legends and Legacy program with the UDIA, got accepted into the program, which I was completely thrilled by, and through the program, met these amazing legends and amazing aspiring leaders, and all these people in the industry who are so amazing.
So they've been a real help to your career and
Definitely.
all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and my interactions with them, the conversations I've had, even just observing them and learning from them, I've realised that my life can be so much more than I imagined. And that was just from the program. And since then, I've won a few awards. And I'm not trying to say that like as a bragging thing. It's just it still dumbfounds me that I started off the year the way I had, ended off the year with these awards. And to me, at the end of the day, as grateful as I am for the awards, you can easily perceive them as just trophies and pieces of paper and just something to put in your CV. But for me, what they signify to me is that in some ways I'm probably capable of more than I believed I was at the time. And in some ways, if that's the case, then a lot of the limits that I had on my career and success in my career were probably self-inflicted more than anything.
Your empathy is definitely inspiring, and it's amazing that you do all this great work, and I'm in awe of that. Giving is one of the best things you can do in life, and it's awesome that you do that. I want to touch on your speech, the Legends and Legacy program at the UDIA luncheon, and how powerful that was. Is that something you could have imagined yourself doing a couple of years ago?
Imagined, yes. I have a pretty good imagination, but not in terms of how effective it was.
So the result from it.
Yeah. I was hopeful that, my base hope was that I wouldn't completely stuff it up and make a fool of myself. But in reality, what I wanted to achieve with that speech was to maybe help other people if there was any way possible that I could do so. Yeah, so, in short, could imagine it, but didn't imagine the impact it would have. And, people are still coming up to me and have been giving me very encouraging feedback on it.
What do you think was the most impactful part of your speech?
I think it's probably two things. One was putting to voice publicly things that people had been thinking about the industry, about society when it comes to leaders and when it comes to women in male-dominated industries like the property development industry. Talking about the lack of representation of people is something that I think a lot of us perhaps think but don't say publicly, a negative voice to that. But more importantly, and I think one of the reasons why people, not just women but also men, have also come up to me is that I was vulnerable but I hope in my own way brave enough to share insights into my own insecurities about why I thought I wasn't good enough and what I had learnt about that and what I hope to change about that in terms of my perspective, specifically more about who leaders are and the fact that I could achieve more than I had thought I could. If my interactions with the legends and the other aspiring leaders have taught me anything, is that these legends in particular have achieved so much, and when I speak to them, they're normal people. They're human beings, and they.
Can I just add, you've achieved so much. Yeah, so you got to stop. You're talking about these legends and what they've achieved. The list of things that you've achieved are nothing short of inspiring. So own it. I think it's special and it's amazing what you've done. So, you're right. They're only human beings, no matter how big they were or how much money they had or, whatever defined those people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all started somewhere similar to us.
Yeah, some with nothing, some with something, whatever, right? Everyone's
yeah.
got a story. Were you nervous during that speech?
Yes.
And how did you contain the nerves?
Before the speech, I was really jittery. It was at a luncheon. I couldn't really eat my food. I gave it to the guy next to me, actually. I was quite nervous, although people said they couldn't tell from the outside. I think part of my great skill in repressing my emotions is that I'm good at repressing my nerves. But for me, I don't see nerves as necessarily a bad thing. I see them as a way of indicating that I really care about something. And I cared about doing a really good job with the speech, not only because, like I said, I didn't want to make a fool of myself, but more importantly, I wanted to share a message I thought was worth sharing and hopefully might help someone else.
Yeah, it was real. At the end of the day, it was vulnerable, it was real, and it cut through them, right?
Yeah.
The mentoring program is obviously a great thing, and I've got like I sort of mentioned in my introduction, I've had an amazing amount of mentors in my life. They've taught me so much and have helped me avoid the pitfalls and a lot of them, and learnt from their mistakes without having to commit my own mistakes and stuff. So in 20 or 30 years, do you see yourself being a mentor?
I see myself as being a mentor right now.
Oh, good. Okay.
And have been in the past. I think we make the mistake of, my husband reminded me of this the other day, but I think we all make the mistake of feeling like we need certain qualifications in order for us to be certain people. And this is the same mistake I had about, leaders, right? I had this attitude when it came to serving. So at church, a lot of people believe that you have to have ex-Christian points before you can serve, or you have to go to Bible college before you can do anything significant in the church. And that's completely not the case. The only thing that qualifies you to serve in the church is the fact that you have a willingness to do so, and the faith and that drives you. That's all you need. You can be a Christian day one and start serving.
Yeah, you don't need any qualifications to be nice, to be good,
exactly, to be kind. All those things you don't need qualifications for. And in fact, if you have to qualify yourself for those kind of qualities, I'd say that there's something lacking. And so I think when it came to mentoring, for example, I started stepping up quite early on as a leader for youth. I see myself as a youth leader and a youth mentor now, and I did back when I was 17 when I first started. And so in that capacity, I see myself as a mentor. I have many conversations with different people now. And again, I think people make the mistake of feeling they'd have to be in some kind of official program, similar to the UDIA Legends of Legacy program or other official mentoring programs out there to be a mentor or a mentee. But in reality, like I feel every conversation I have with someone, I'm learning something.
Yeah, look, and I don't think you can be taught experience, and experience is the best mentor at the end of the day.
Yes.
So, obviously you're passing on that experience to them, and that's amazing. So you're really motivated to be the best person you can be. I can see that really clearly with all of the stuff that you do. Why is that, and where do you think you get the drive from?
I think part of that comes from the way I was brought up. My parents are quite inspirational to me in terms of how hard they work and their motivations for doing so. They sacrifice a lot for my family and in some ways have sacrificed a lot of themselves and their desires for other people. I mean, they're not perfect people, but they try really hard, and I think that's as much as you can expect anyone to do. They've been a great inspiration to me in that regard, particularly the development industry is really tough, and people and companies fold over all the time, and they've pushed through really difficult times, and I've witnessed that firsthand. And so I think that in some ways has helped motivate me to see it firsthand and see that it can be done and the fruits of that. But I think ultimately what motivates me is, again, the fact that as a Christian, I believe our life isn't just up until our death, that we have eternity beyond death. And so things of this world, whether it's material goods or wealth,
temporary.
Our status, all of that is temporary. All of that was fade. You don't bring that to the grave with you.
No, you're taking nothing with you.
Yeah.
You came with nothing, you'll leave with nothing.
Exactly.
Other than the eternal message that you leave behind,
Exactly.
I guess.
And so for me, the thing that truly lasts are relationships, even beyond, in generations to come when people will forget who Priscilla Tran was. My hope is that my impact on people would have fed through even maybe the generations in ways that I could never imagine, that my small act of kindness to one person, the words I've said to another person, the way I've listened to someone, that's impacted them in a way that has influenced them with another person.
So those actions are all acts of love, right?
Yes.
So what I think you're telling us is that the only constant is love.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
So aside from these legends that you've met through the UDIA program, who else do you look up to? I mean, you've just told us about your parents, but is there anyone outside of that you'd look up to?
Yes. There's too many to count and recount right now.
Standouts, the
standouts. To me, everything I do is does stem from my faith. I'm not afraid of that or ashamed of that, but I know some people find that uncomfortable. But ultimately, when I look at the life and death, particularly of Jesus, to me, that's the greatest example of a life well lived. He didn't have much in terms of material wealth. And in fact, in terms of relationships, like a lot of his closest friends betrayed him. And so in terms of what the markers of success by the world, he would have been deemed a failure. The people he came to serve ended up killing him. And so if the story ended there, then I think, we'd all say that, we've learnt lessons from there, but so what? But the reason his impact has lasted, beyond 2,000 years is the fact that, he rose again. Yes, showing that his death was satisfying to God. But at the end of the day, his impact on his life in the Western world is, it shaped the hospitals, the schools that we have, our education, our value for human life. Things that, most people wouldn't realize impacted by him. And that's because he treated all people as valuable, whether you were a leper, whether you were a child, whether you were, a disgraced woman. He saw you as someone not only that was valuable, but someone that was worth dying for. And how many people can you say have died for you? And knowing that fact has shaped every decision I've made, in small or large ways, I'd hope to say. And so it influences me now. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, if I die today or if I die in 50 years' time, my marker of success is whether or not I've lived in accordance with that, putting my faith in Jesus and following his steps in how he lived and how he died for other people.
Wonderful to see that your faith is so strong, and obviously that comes through and has obviously helped you through, some of your toughest times. So, that works for you, and that's fantastic. So I'm just going to go back into some turning points in your life. So switching from architecture to property studies was a bit of a turning point for you. Have there been any other pivotal moments in your life?
I think moving to Sydney was one. When we made the decision to move to Sydney, it was initially for my husband's work. I knew I'd be able to find work in Sydney. There's more opportunities and development in Sydney than there are in Brisbane. So I wasn't surprised I got the job here. But the role I have at City West Housing has opened so many doors. And I don't know whether I would have won the awards I have had with my work at City West Housing and the passion I've grown for contributing to society through the development of affordable housing. And now I have greater passion for wanting to influence policy in that. And I didn't have that, 2 years ago. And the discussions I've had with industry leaders about it, and I hope to have more of those discussions, including with politicians. For anyone listening, please give me a call if you want to talk about this more. It's made me realise that, it's something I want to advocate for, and I don't think anyone's in disagreement about the importance of affordable housing. It's just about how we actually get there.
So what are some of the characteristics that you think have led to your success so far?
I think the first one would be that all of us have something that we can take from others. When I say take, I don't mean steal, but we all have something to gain from other people. Everyone around you, whether they're the child that walks past you on the street, the guy that sits next to you on the bus, your Uber driver, everyone has something to teach you. Your parents, even if you don't want to listen to them. But we also have something to give. And I think if we all realised that we had both those things, we'd all be better people.
Amazing. Priscilla, been an absolute honour and a pleasure to have you with us here today. You've definitely taught me so much. Your vulnerability, your willingness to, be so, real about your situation is a testament to the person that you are, and it's great to have seen you come through all of that hardship. You should be really proud of the person you are and you've become, and really be proud of all of the achievements that you've achieved in your life. Thank you for coming to talk to us today, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Developmental, Property and the Mind podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, available wherever you get your podcasts. Or to talk to Joe, visit trafalgar.com.au. That's TRIFALGA.com.au.